Let us start by imagining the fact that the distribution of the galaxies is a mere image of the distribution of some kind of distributed technology system or network that is bound together by galactic filaments of plasma, electricity, and dust and gas and other matter that integrate the galaxies into the singular cosmic web as the equivalent of what would have to be artificial neurons and networks thereof that mimic the organization and structure of human brain neurons and networks. In addition to being distributed like them, or so it appears, all of which together invoke images in my head of some kind of artificially intelligent neural network that we call the universe. So let us narrow our focus down to the structure of the interstellar galactic network compared to what are called biologically inspired computers and networks, which includes what are called artificial neural networks that are used to increase the power of computer chips, including entire supercomputers whose circuits are entangled just like the neurons in your brain, all of which are entangled like the black holes that supposedly riddle our universe and connect different regions of space, as perhaps the equivalent of nuclei in artificial neural cells we call galaxies. Also bear in mind that the universe cannot possibly be a gigantic, real-life brain, because live brains are made of soft biological cells and other tissue, whereas the bits and pieces of the universe are largely made of flaming balls and streams of molten plasma and gas and chunks of blended silicates, metals, and their respective oxides that are used in the development and manufacturing of brain-inspired central processors, supercomputers, and virtually all other types of electronic equipment. So now let us consider that the trillions and billions of neurons and synapses in a human brain more or less correspond to the numbers of galaxies, stars, planets, and moons in our universe, which in turn more or less correspond to the number of artificial neurons and synapses in neuromorphic computer chips and supercomputers. This would include multi-core neuromorphic chips and supercomputers, as we bear in mind that galaxies and stars and planets at large harbor cores inside their interiors. Perhaps have small processors and other components in some kind of multi-core neuromorphic computer system we call the universe. As we bear in mind that black holes are supposedly computers, according to Scientific American magazine. Whereas the universe at large is supposedly a computer universe and an intelligent universe, according to these book titles. And with me obsessing on the fact that black holes are supposedly computers, I am going to compare this concept to what are called fuzzball black holes, which are akin to black holes, supposedly, but not quite black holes, because they harbor no singularity or event horizon, as we juxtapose this to the concept of what is called fuzzy computing and fuzzy neural systems and computer vision and so forth, juxtaposed to fuzzball black holes, and what is just Another set of amazing structural and linguistic similarities between nature and brain-based technology that I think are too coincidental to be a coincidence. Also consider that the DNA and cellular nuclei are the equivalent of biological computers, or CPUs, and the black hole nuclei of galaxies, like our Milky Way, are identical to the nuclei of neural cells, all of which are structurally indistinguishable from each other. But with us narrowing our focus down here to these comparisons of the interconnectedness of artificial synapses compared to the supposed interconnectedness of the central black holes of our Milky Way galaxy and the Andromeda galaxy. As we bear in mind, galaxies are supposedly connected via their central black hole wormholes, just like artificial and biological neurons and synapses are respectively interconnected via circuits and axons, dendrites, and so forth. The universe as a brain theory, real and artificial, is also supported by the fact that the universe is supposedly behaving as if it were immersed in some kind of invisible fluid, according to the so-called fluid universe theory book. And we all know that the brain is immersed in cerebral fluid. In addition to being electrically active, just like the universe is electrically active, just like the technologies I am comparing the brain and the universe to. I would also like to break sequence here before we move on and show you these oddball comparisons of the late astrophysicist Stephen Hawking's conception of the black hole structure and origin of the early universe to these microfluidic-based technologies. That includes synthetic, biomimetic, microfluidic neurons, and biosensors. The similarities are too coincidental to be a coincidence, I believe. Whatever the case, the galaxies appear to be playing the roles as bits and pieces in some kind of man-made artificial fluidic system, with central galactic black holes and their wormholes, as well as galactic filaments, playing their respective roles. With intergalactic plasma filaments, aka Birkeland filaments of electricity and gas and dust and other matter, appearing to serve as the equivalent of circuits, channels, valves, and so forth that would be found in everything from artificial microfluidic nuance to what are called inertial microfluidic and nanofluidic laboratory on-chip devices, with me making no effort to differentiate between them. These devices are used by doctors and scientists to study and manipulate cells, DNA, and other particulates at the microscopic level, the dynamics of which involve the use of inertial force of the type that also governs the inertial flow of galactic dust, gas, stars, planets, and so forth through the galaxies like our Milky Way. With central galactic black holes and their wormholes, as well as galactic filaments, playing their respective roles as the equivalent of microfluidic and nanofluidic inlet and outlet valves and biolines, channels, fibers, and so forth that transport blood, DNA, chemical particulates, electricity, and so forth to and from these microfluidic and nanofluidic laboratory on-chip devices. Just like the galactic filaments carry dust and gas and electricity and other matter and energy to and from the galaxies, as previously noted, especially during their formation process. galactic filaments also serving as the equivalent of blood vessels and capillaries that transport blood, nutrients, waste, and other matter to and from brain cells, which are in the same relative location of the central inlet valves in these spiral fluidic lab-on-chip devices, especially when we compare them to spiral galaxies like our Milky Way, with the nuclei of brain cells being in the same relative location as galactic black hole nuclei, in which the central Milky Way black hole relative to the location of our solar system are in the same relative positions of the inlet and outlet valves in these spiral microfluidic biosensor devices. This means that our Milky Way galaxy and other spiral galaxies could be playing simultaneous roles as spiral microfluidic devices fused with synthetic neurons that are disguised as galaxies in a cosmic artificial brain of some kind, with our Milky Way's central black hole also perhaps being a computer inside some kind of computerized centrifugal microfluidic biodisk we call our Milky Way galaxy, with this singular example of a computerized version being the only example I could find on the internet. And this brings us to the fact that the spin of our Milky Way galaxy generates a centrifugal force by virtue of the fact it is literally spinning at hundreds of thousands of miles per second. Whereas centrifugal microfluidic lab-on disks spin at a mere thousands, if not hundreds of revolutions per minute. With the centrifugal forces of these devices being used to force cells, DNA, and other particulates through their fluidic channels. Just like centrifugal force in spiral galaxies has a lot to do with the flows of gas, dust, and stars and planets and so forth through their rings. Centrifugal microfluidic lab-on disks are just another tool used by scientists and doctors to analyze and manipulate cells, DNA, blood chemicals, and so forth at the microscopic level. The rings of spiral galaxies, by the way, are little more than supernovae shock waves that have reached a state of equilibria in spiral form that is perpetuated by each new generation of supernovae explosions and shock waves. Where it gets even trickier and more significant is that the inertial and centrifugal force exerted by our Milky Way and other spiral galaxies, I presume, are more or less mere images of the internal dynamics of what are called particle accelerators, like cyclotrons or synchrotrons. But the forces inside the galaxies are not nearly as powerful as these machines, however. But they do the same thing, sorta, kinda. This means that the spiral and circular flows of suns and planets and moons and so forth through the arms of spiral galaxies are mere images of the flows of atoms and subatomic particles through the rings of cyclotrons and synchrotrons, with me making no effort to differentiate or explain much about these devices, except to say that the Milky Way does indeed produce synchrotron radiation in its rings, and the location of the suns and planets and moons in our Milky Way galaxy relative to the locations of the central black hole are in the same relative locations as the ions and the ion source in these cyclotron and synchrotron diagrams, with the ion source being where central black holes and spiral galaxies are located, as you could probably ascertain by looking at these examples, as we bear in mind that black holes produce ions just like the ions between the synaptic gaps in brain neurons. compared to the ions in particle accelerators that are flowing and distributed like the stars in the rings of spiral galaxies. Key words: the ions from the brain, ions from black holes. This means that ions are just another common denominator that supports the theory that the universe is some kind of cosmic brain. It is also significant that galaxies like our own are largely engulfed by what is called a dark matter halo, which is basically invisible matter that might be playing the role as artificial axons in artificial neurons we call galaxies. If there is anything at all to the theory that the universe is sentient or intelligent or is God, then this and my other videos are the closest you will ever come to finding out how this is possible. Where these comparisons get even scarier is that the suns, like our own, relative to their orbiting planets, like our Earth, mirror the structure and dynamics of synapses. This includes the ions produced by synapses, as well as by the sun and the earth relative to each other, with the ions in the electrons in the atoms in our bodies perhaps being the equivalent of ions trapped between the synaptic gaps in some kind of artificial cosmic mind that some people might call God, in which these hypothetical synapses are alive with electricity and light and magnetism, as they also serve as the equivalent of optical and laser magnetic computer read-write heads, as well as biological and chemical sensors and so forth that are all structured like bits and pieces of the human brain, all structured like bits and pieces of the universe. And as we can see, the similarities in the dynamics between the sun and planets and these computer and sensor technologies and other technologies are uncanny. And they become even more so when we compare them to the structure of human brain neurons and their synapses. And with me splitting hairs here as I wrap up this video, as we consider that the chemical composition of the inner planets and the moon, I'm sure, include a meaningful amount of iron oxide, plus other metal oxides and elements, just like the elements found in these complementary metal oxide semiconductor-based neuromorphic chips, and their lattices are interconnects, with you noticing the CMOS acronym in these comparisons to the planets in our solar system, the inner planets, while also noticing how the architecture of this neuromorphic chip loosely mirrors the architecture of our solar system, especially when we factor in what is called the interplanetary network of metallic and silicon dust, gas, and probably plasma that circulates among the planets and helps interconnect them. It is also significant that the solar system and arrangement of the stars at large also mirrored the architecture and dynamics of these types of laboratory on ships, as you can see with your own eyes. I believe the universe is a fusion of these and other technologies, including types we have not seen in this video. And if there is some kind of God or gods, then what you have seen in this video is partially how it is, or they keep track of the organisms throughout the universe. And if you like this video, subscribe, share, and hit the notification and like buttons.